We are going to start off with the passing of Mike Jones, who was best known as Virgil, had many different characters throughout his career. Wei, when you hear about Virgil, what do you think about?
Ooh, what a big question. What a loaded question. I mean, there's a lot. Obviously, in recent years, you think about Lonely Virgil, you think about Olive Garden, you think about F Money, and a lot of fun, honestly, that really kind of came with this man's embracing of his online persona. But when you think about his, bigger career, of course, you think about the run with $1 Million Man, you think about the $1 Million Championship, and maybe even a little bit of Vincent in the NWO.
I mean, the guy found himself in some pretty significant periods of pro wrestling history. I would never go so far as to say that this man was a cornerstone of either of these companies, but I mean, he, he started. It's interesting because his birth date has, been up in question today with what Wikipedia has listed, but I tend to lean towards the profile that Slam Wrestling did a few years ago on him, where the roommate he was living with, like a close friend of his, had confirmed it to be April 7th, 1951. So if you're going with that date, like think about that. This guy isn't getting into wrestling until his mid 30s, if that age checks out. It's not like he's getting into this young. And I mean, he pretty much started with WWF and then is immediately sent to Memphis. And that's where he wrestles for a period of time as Soul Train Jones. And he's only there about 4 or 5 months. But during that time, I mean, he teamed with Rocky Johnson. They had a run with the tag titles there, even had an AWA title match with Nick Bockwinkel. So if you woke up today thinking, man, did Nick Bockwinkel and Virgil ever have a match for the AWA heavyweight title? They did indeed. And then he is brought back to WWF, and he is his first kind of formal character is Lucius Brown, which didn't have quite the staying power, but then is repackaged as Virgil, the bodyguard for Ted DiBiase, which was the character that famously, like, this was Vince McMahon's idea of, if I was going to be a character, this would be it. And Ted DiBiase was this incredible creation of the company, and Virgil was the lackey for him. And they did all of these vignettes, many that, I mean, very heavily like racial overtones to them as well, with the just the dynamic here of this rich white wealthy individual with his black bodyguard doing all of these demeaning tasks. But he was the constant throughout that period, involved in all the big $1 Million Man angles, from the main event when Andre beat Hogan for the title and tried to buy the title off of Andre the Giant to set up WrestleMania 4. And then it ran its course, and then they did the turn in 91 where he finally turned on him. And it was a significant turn that the audience got into, because this had not just been some pairing for a couple of months and then you break them up. It was years that you had seen this guy just under the thumb of Ted DiBiase. So you go back to that period, and not to say they were like these mind-blowing matches or anything, but Ted DiBiase was tremendous worker at the time, and Virgil was a very over babyface for that period. They put him with Roddy Piper sort of as his mouthpiece. So I would look at the peak of his career as that 91 run that he got with DiBiase. They did WrestleMania that year. They did SummerSlam, and they were married to each other on the road. Like, they just worked all year long in all the cities together. And the rest of his run, like, he was in the company through 94 and pretty much just a prelim to mid-card babyface that would work against the heels and, get the occasional television win here or there, but was kind of a undercard player. And then leaves the company in 94, and he's on the independents, pops up in WCW in 1996. And of course, Virgil, being the name that everyone just assumed was their little poke at Dusty Rhodes, Virgil Runnels. So he goes to WCW, and now he is Vincent. So this is when this man is realizing, okay, I'm going to have longevity in this industry, but I am going to be like the punchline. And he would become Vincent, later Shane. He ran the gamut of different names.
He certainly did. Yeah. One of the many names I think attached to the NWO that you might have considered one too many. That might have certainly watered down the brand.
And he was one of the earlier additions too. It's not like they were at like 15 when they added him. I mean, they were still at the I would say the compact level of NW, because he's there in 96 when it's still a relatively fresh character. I mean, one thing you can say about this guy, whether you're looking at him in 1988 or 1998, I mean, dude didn't age a day. So it's why I can believe such a variance of what his age could have been. Because even, I mean, he had been in some poor health the last few years, and you had seen him really start to age. But I would say even a decade ago, you looked at him, it's not like this man had aged greatly over the course of these 35 years or so.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm just pointing this out. The man had a lot of staying power, and yeah, was part of the NWO. It was sort of, I wouldn't say anything too memorable that he was in. Then they put him in the West Texas Rednecks. As we mentioned, Shane. I completely have a blank spot of this guy in 2000 when he was with Ernest Miller as Mr. Jones, and then replaced by Ms. Jones, who I very clearly remember and had no clue that this was the replacement for Mr. Jones. There's only so much of WCW 2000 that I'm going to retain, and this, I trust that it happened.
I read that in your bio today, and I certainly had no recollection of it. I'm sure there are a lot of notes in this man's career that.
Do you remember him coming back with Ted DiBiase Jr. in 2010 in WWE?
No, not really.
I certainly did not come to mind. I did remember it when I watched the clips today. They tried to put him with Ted DiBiase Jr., but it was only to serve as he would be fired and replaced by Maurice. And that led to the historic pairing of Ted DiBiase Jr. and Maurice, which had chemistry that, I mean, to this day, we look back on as the prototype for a male-female dynamic of a heel. Really something that they were able to accomplish together. Could have used Virgil for that run. But that was kind of his last appearance with WWE. And in recent years, I mean, this guy would just notoriously, he would show up at conventions, whether invited or not, just set up his table. He would be selling his 8x10s anywhere and everywhere, from shows to conventions to subways, and did a bunch of appearances for GCW, including their pay-per-view 2 years ago. And this is probably going to be the image that many attach with him, wrestling superstar Virgil at a very quiet convention.
I mean, at this point, almost like an iconic photo. And I mean, I don't know what his immediate reaction to maybe learning about this meme would have been, but the man has certainly embraced it in many recent years.
I mean, this photo you pulled up is a signed copy, is it not? So, I mean, hey, you got $20. He's going to sign just about anything for you. But
yeah, and when I think about Virgil, especially in recent years, I do more so think about a bit of a resurgence he's had in relevance, for a modern fan base who, whether or not, knowing him through the notoriety of a meme like this, found a new enjoyment, I think, out of just how the man started to employ a different persona online. And according to that Slam article that you mentioned previously, John, we know that he had nothing really to do with it. I mean, he had as much to do with the social media as the Iron Sheik did, with his. Nonetheless, hopefully at least it provided maybe a little bit of money for the man, towards his latter years. Certainly in video appearances, it gave him a few bookings, that made him, again, fun to watch and gave us a lot of entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, he really had his problems the last few years. A couple of years ago, he had 2 small strokes, and he was also dealing with dementia. Slam also did a story today, and his sister had stated to them, like, the stories of him having cancer were not true. But he was dealing with other issues as well. I know they did a GoFundMe for him at one point I think it was around the time he had the strokes as well. So, I mean, it was someone that was still trying to just carve out some form of income through professional wrestling. And I never like to look at that as, stuff for comedy that I know Virgil really leaned into as well. You hear a lot of stories with Virgil from a lot of the independent talent that was around him seemed to have a lot of just like fun stories around him, as opposed to this guy that was, it was sort of like this guy, whether he was in or not, of the joke, it seemed to be he very much leaned into it as well, and realized like that is his connection to this industry, and that was sort of what he set out to do, and do the convention circuit, and try and just, for a guy that has not been on national television for over 20 years.
Yeah, I had a brief AEW. I don't know if you'd even call it run, but
he did the Inner Circle stuff as well, which I recall being like, it was like some entertaining cameos that he did, and he did a few of them with AEW. You're right.
Yeah, it's troubling to maybe hear about some of the details of his dementia, towards the latter stages of his life, and hope, especially like what maybe a flirtation with homelessness as well. It again maybe calls to question how much we're taking care of our people who have had earlier careers in this industry, but hopefully he wasn't suffering too bad towards these last few years.
So our condolences to Mike Jones, best known as Virgil.